Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today's July 1st, and I thought we'd do something a little bit fun here today and take a look at the past year, the big heat wave back in 2021. I thought we'd do a lead up here on my social media posts the week leading up to this extreme event, one of the most extreme weather events that any of us living right now will experience here across Pacific Northwest. We set all kinds of record high temperatures out there and a very extreme weather event, no doubt. I started mentioning it as we went through about June 20th, or it started to show things warming up across the region, but it only showed Seattle in the upper 80s there for June 27th, this is I believe here, and we hit 104 at SeaTac that day. And I did mention this was likely underdone. So if we go ahead and take a look at 2009, you guys remember that one, July, we set that all-time record high for SeaTac at 103 degrees Fahrenheit here, and I mentioned thermal trough. And so we were starting to talk about a little bit more here as we went through the June 20th time frame here. But once we got a little bit further, I think this was June 21st, the GFS started latching on to some of these really ridiculous temperatures here. And if you were following me on social media and Twitter back in that time here 3 years ago, you remember some of these temperatures showing up, and we were kind of mocking it and laughing at it a little bit here. But truth be told, the GFS latched onto some of these temperatures before any other weather model did. So it did a pretty good job sniffing out these huge values, even though some of them were off by a little bit. It was the first one to show these extreme values. And if we take a look at the GFS, it was showing these very warm temperatures for Seattle and kind of an extended heat wave all the way on through the early portion of July. And the European was not showing it quite that much. In fact, let me back up here, and I'll go ahead and click back out of that and go to the European model here. And you can see it was only calling for a couple days towards 90 degrees here, not the lofty 3 straight days of 100 plus here for Seattle and much of the Pacific Northwest. Some areas were hitting over 120 degrees here, just absolutely crazy stuff across the region. And then we started to come into more agreement here on June 22nd here. If I take a look, you can scroll through here and you can see the huge ridge just perfectly set up right over Washington and British Columbia here. So the model started sniffing this out pretty well in advance here, and some pretty intense high pressure here across the region, and it gave rise to this very powerful thermal trough here. We had offshore flow and just a perfect setup here for a very dynamic heat wave across the Pacific Northwest. So again, that was June 22nd there. Here's June 22nd again, and then the European started to warm things up here on the 22nd, a little bit later than what the GFS was showing, and not quite the dramatic temperatures here, but it started to show it as well. And that's when we really started to realize that we may be into something special here. Now, if we take a look at the European coming in at it's calling for 103 here on the 7th. And this is a pretty good forecast. You're looking at 132 hours out, and we had 104 at SeaTac. So really good forecast there once the European did lock on. And this was for the 27th as well. The GFS was calling for 106, and we did hit 104. So the model started doing pretty good at this time frame. And we also shared a lot of memes with this incredible event coming on here. And I made this one talking about the GFS just showing some ridiculous temperatures here. And we thought maybe the European would step in here and calm everyone down and bring those temperatures back down. But as we saw a day or two later, it also latched onto some of those extreme values. And now, if we take a look at, I believe, what this was the morning of the 22nd, you can see some of these intense temperatures that started rolling in on the European here. So again, starting to match the GFS, and people started to get a little bit crazy here that we're paying attention to these weather models here, because anything towards 100 degrees is just outright insanity here for Western Washington. And of course, I like to make fun of some of the GFS and what it was doing and some of the model runs that were coming in. For example, the 18Z GFS apparently on the June 22nd had everybody laughing with some ridiculous temperatures rolling in. And if we click on that, check this out. The GFS on the 18Z had 114 for Seattle. Didn't quite get that hot there, but it wasn't backing down on these extreme temperatures. So if we take a look on the 23rd and we take a look at the European model here, we're still 3, 4, 5 days before the event, but it was doing a really good job at sniffing out this extreme heat here as we went on in through June 28th. And now, again, this is me just sharing more additional European ensemble members here. And this is a weather graphic I like to show a lot on my channel here. This is the temperature cross section. You can really see how the afternoon time warms up here. And then you can see on the 28th, the peak of this heat wave here on the European. This was the 23rd of June in the morning. And again, sharing more of the GFS, just absolutely crazy run to run, showing these just ridiculous temperatures out there across the region, having lots of fun with that. And again, you can see just how intensely unusual this ridge was for this time of year up and across the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if that'll allow me to zoom in. It will not, but a big death ridge setting up here across the Pacific Northwest, as some people mentioned in my comments. So the marine push was also pretty special as well. And so you could see that as we went through the nighttime hours, it really crashed those temperatures down and gave us some relief, like Mother Nature just automatically flipping a giant air conditioning switch. And the GFS, we started to talk about this here as we went into the 24th here, about the cat and mouse game that goes on across some of the Seattle Metro and the Puget Sound, because of course the Puget Sound is a much cooler water, is much cooler water. It's really difficult to warm up the Puget Sound. It is connected to the very cool Pacific Ocean, and we've got that cold water current off the coastline there. But we mentioned this cat and mouse game between some of these easterly winds coming up towards SeaTac, and would we see all-time record highs, and just how hot would it get? Would we hit 110 degrees, or would there be enough of an onshore flow here coming off the Puget Sound to suppress those temperatures just enough? But stay tuned for that. We have more on that here coming towards the end of the video. And then we went day by day. Again, the Europeans showing ridiculous temperatures coming up as we went through the 28th. The control run climbed for 110 degrees here at about 4 or 5 days out. And GFS with ridiculous stuff going on still. And then the European ensembles really started to latch onto this as well. So you can see that all the ensemble members, virtually all of them had, I think, over 104 degrees, except for just a very few select of them with the control run climb for 111. And again, we ended up hitting 108 for that day. And then this was Stampede Pass. Check out some of the temperatures. This is pretty high up in the mountains here. I forget exactly what Stampede Pass is, somewhere around 3,000 feet. I want to say that's Snoqualmie Pass, and it's something similar. But you can see these very warm temperatures that went on. And if you remember Mount Rainier, how much snow and glacier loss went on that year. I remember I had numerous people commenting to me about how they could see the brown on the north side of Mount Rainier for the first time in their lives. Just a very interesting look at Mount Rainier. I wish I had more pictures of it. I might have some in my archive somewhere, but I didn't dig them out. But anyway, that was something very interesting along with this event as well. And check it out, Whidbey Island, just to show you the effects of the Puget Sound. Of course, here's the Seattle Metro. Whidbey Island, if you've never been out there, you can take the ferry out there. You can drive out there across Beam Mount Vernon here, and Anacortes is right there. It stays very nice and cool sometimes in the summertime, and you can really see those temperatures reflected here, as they were only expecting temperatures in the 70s here during this massive heat wave. And we made fun of the GFS when it first started to show those ridiculous temperatures, and I made this meme here, and the GFS, kudos to it for jumping on those very warm temperatures in advance. And something about living in Seattle, a lot of houses don't have air conditioning. And on top of that, even if you do have air conditioning, a lot of houses have upstairs bedrooms, I should say. And it's designed to trap heat. They're well-insulated homes here. You don't want to lose any of that heat when you're dealing with the 6, 7, 8 months of very chilly conditions, breezy, and it's raining outside and it's cold. So you want to trap that heat. And I can remember 3 days before the event or so, and it's 87 degrees, and it's already extremely hot and uncomfortable. And that's just how it gets in Seattle when it gets very hot here. So we're making funny memes, kind of making fun of ourselves and the weather forecast upcoming here. And I went back into the past here, and you can see the low temperature on June 28th, way back in 1954, was 45 degrees. So just kind of showing you that we can get pretty cool summers around here, and just how ridiculous the forecast high was for this time of year. Mid-level water vapor loop here, you can see that just the heat dome, the death ridge here, just over the top of the Pacific Northwest. I saved this one just so we could have it. This would eventually kick the onshore flow down here off the California coastline, would eventually bring that marine push and put an end to our heat wave. But in the meantime, we just had this dominant clockwise flow of that big ridge over the area. And this is the thermal trough. So again, we get the big ridge of high pressure over the top, and we get this offshore compression winds, and you really heat things up here when you bring those compression winds. It lowers the pressure and get that thermal trough in the offshore flow, and that creeps all the way up and brings very warm air all the way up into western British Columbia during these events. And if I click through here, you can again see on the GFS the position of that thermal trough there as well. Now, we had a lot of conversation about this too, because we would get people chiming in saying, hey, this is nothing in Texas. You guys need to, you guys need to grow up and toughen up a little bit here. But the houses are designed differently. I mean, it's not the same thing here. And I mentioned that telling someone in Seattle that the heat they're about to experience is normal for insert random area is like telling someone in Texas during the Arctic outbreak last winter that those temperatures are normal in Canada, Alaska, and Siberia here. And so got a lot of traction on that one. There was pretty fun to share that because it's all relative, and houses are designed differently in different places here. And you are not used to that cold or the heat in some portions of the world. And again, cross section that I like to share here as we went through the social media days coming up. And I mean, Saturday was 102 at SeaTac. That's close to the all-time record high. We went to 104 on Sunday and then 108 on Monday. And there was not much relief in the overnight hours. I can just remember not being able to sleep and actually like laying outside for a while. But then you can see the cool down that eventually finally happened. And again, kind of showing you the thermal trough on the scale of North America here. There's Alaska and Florida. There's Mexico and California. And look at this thermal trough just all the way up into British Columbia here, just feeding this very warm air up across the Pacific Northwest. And then the thing that happens with these thermal troughs is when they do shift inland, you can get those rapid marine pushes that I already mentioned here. But again, kind of showing you that thermal trough there and the eventual marine push that came up the coastline as well. We also did a poll there, possible name for ongoing heat wave. Post your better ideas below here. And I kind of listed 4 things: the thermal vortex, Canadian bacon, Cactus Express, and the heat apocalypse, or whatever, how you pronounce that there. And Canadian bacon won, and probably rightfully so, because Canada was exceptionally hard hit. I mean, they had all-time record temperature. Some places got over 120 degrees. Some of those temperatures are greater than the all-time record high in Las Vegas, for example. And they had huge firestorms and just all kinds of craziness up there. So that's probably why that one won there on the poll. But as we got a little bit closer to it, this is on the 26th here, we started trying to narrow down these temperatures here. And again, some of the models were still underdoing this a little bit. Again, 102 on the 26th, 104 and 108. So the European actually was a little too cool on the first 2 days and a little too warm on the last day there. And Joe Boomgaard's Rodnick here put out this meme here. I was there, 2021 the heat dome in Seattle. He went with 110 there. We ended up hitting 108 close enough here. But yeah, funny stuff there. And this was interesting because before the noon hour, we were hitting some areas. I believe even for SeaTac hit 93 degrees, if my memory serves me correctly, before 9 a.m. on one of the days here. And you can see hitting 100 degrees is just pure insanity here, right next to the Puget Sound, especially before noon. Just incredible. So this is something else I was doing out there as well. So I had my rice cooker out there. We were making some rice for some reason, but I cooked it outside. And I don't know if that was good for the unit there, but just something funny to look at. So I also compared this to other extreme weather events: 1880 Storm King, 1950 Arctic Blast, 1962 Columbus Day Storm, and the 2021 West Coast heat wave. The heat wave may have been more extreme than each of these individual events here. So something to remember that as you go on and become older on into your later years, you can tell the youngins about that weather event that you endured back in 2021. And some of the high resolution models were actually coming in a little bit too hot there on the 28th. And the GFS, check this out. I mean, this is the forecast of the 28th there. It was still calling for 120 degrees there on the 28th. I mean, we only hit 108 only, I say, but some areas in the outlying regions here did get pretty downright warm, but it was definitely very entertaining model watching here as we got up closer to the event. And so the all-time new record was set on, I believe it was June 27th. Yes, it is there with 104. And that all-time record, of course, would not even stand 24 hours as the next day we hit 108. And so then we started this cat and mouse game of what happens when you're close to the Puget Sound or in the Seattle area here. You get this marine layer versus the heat dome bouncing back and forth, and these temperatures will jump and ebb and flow really dramatically. And I think I have some more posts about that coming up. But the Des Moines Pier was 71 degrees while SeaTac was 104. That's a distance of less than 3 miles as the crow flies. So some pretty impressive stuff. And again, I mentioned this potential for some of these easterly winds trying to bump up the temperatures last minute here across some portions of SeaTac versus the onshore, or a little bit more of a northwest flow, which will bump the temperatures down a bit. And I was comparing some of these temperatures coming that we went through on those days here. For example, 98 versus 2 p.m. versus 96 the day before. I always like to do comparisons like that. And again, here it is. It was actually 73 degrees at 73 at the end of the Des Moines Pier there. And it was 44 degrees warmer there at SeaTac over the period of about 4 miles here. So very intense stuff. This was the all-time record high day, June 28th. So you can see the UW model had its temperature scale pegged. It didn't go any higher. They got the gray there, and we needed more. We needed more colors basically on the UW map. But yeah, so let's take a look here. Intense temperature gradient here. The winds are due west now here in Normandy Park, and temperature drops. We would go through these rapid temperature drops, and the wind would shift back and forth, and the heat would rebuild here. And SeaTac just off to my east here, but not even 2 miles away here, was 102 while I was at 95 here. And so a big temperature gradient exists then. And I went over some of these individual model runs here. I went out to the stores here. The entire areas here were just completely cleared out of all the popsicle action here. So that was something kind of fun to point out as well. And something interesting, we hit 90 degrees at my house at 9:08 a.m. just just insanity. I mean, that's just ridiculous. No other way to describe that. But then that westerly surge would come in and we would drop back down to 79. And we ended up getting to 102 on this day. So you can see the wild temperature swings, the back and forth cat and mouse game between the Puget Sound and the Seattle area. And again, the high resolution model is a little bit too hot, what we're predicting here. And I'm going to skip through that. And again, the cat and mouse game, the battle I mentioned again. I mentioned the marine push again on the 28th. I was putting out posts left and right here. And the European, I think, what did it have? Yeah, it had about 109 for Seattle. Not doing too bad. And this one was on the nighttime of the 27th here at 104. And so this was my forecast as of the morning here. So we had hot air aloft, of course, with the huge dome here. We had the easterly wind component. And again, this is what it looks like on the SeaTac Hill versus the Puget Sound. You get this westerly component. You get these temperatures that bounce around back and forth. And you'll get these surges. And then the heat dome will jump back. And it usually peaks right around 5 or 6 p.m. as you go through the later portion of June. And my official prediction there was 108. It's one of the most proud predictions I think I've ever done. I kind of nailed it right on the nose there with it, just the exact temperature that would occur at SeaTac. And again, it was 102 at my house, about 1.7 miles to the west of that. And this is something my kids wanted to do here.
All-time record temperature to you. Happy all-time record temperature to you. Happy all-time record temperature to SeaTac. Happy all-time record temperature to you.
So yeah, that's how we wrapped up the day there with that pretty extreme stuff going on there for much of Western Washington, Oregon. And I do have an educational video about this heat wave as well. But yeah, if you want to just do some Googling and look up the 2021 heat wave, if you want to dive into some more information about individual locations and what kind of temperatures they got, because some places in Canada have some pretty extreme and exceptional and rare stories to tell with this heat wave, and it's worth diving into those and reading some of those articles about it. But anyway, I just wanted to go over this for some fun. Looks like we have some heat of our own coming up here as we go towards the weekend, but we're not looking at anything at 108. We have a very outside chance that we might touch some upper 90s or 100 degrees for SeaTac, but that's still very unlikely. That's a pretty extreme temperature here. But again, we still have a few days to go, and I'll be breaking that down in the daily briefings. Otherwise, hope you guys are having a good day. Click like and subscribe. We'll do the normal briefing again tomorrow, and I will talk to you guys then.